I am the Ascended Master Paul the Venetian, Chohan of the Third Ray, as you all well know, but I still enjoy saying it. And so, how do you pervert the heart chakra? How do you close the heart chakra? Through love. How do you heal the heart chakra? Through love. Does this make any sense to anyone? It is not meant to make sense unless you recognize, of course, that there is divine love and there is human love, or rather, love-based love and fear-based love, unconditional love and conditional love. And so, the heart chakra is meant to be the open door for divine love to flow into your being and into the world. But when you feel that divine love is rejected, then you decide to close off the heart chakra because you think somehow that you need to protect divine love as you need to protect the I Am Presence. But of course, divine love is unconditional. How can anything from an undescended sphere harm or even influence divine love? That which has no conditions cannot be affected by that which has conditions. And so people almost universally go through this reaction where they feel their love is rejected in this world. This, of course, started with the fallen beings, and then they feel the need to close off their heart chakra. But how do you justify closing the heart chakra? Through human love, where you now define conditions. You can only open your heart to other people under certain conditions. And this, once you impose these conditions, is then what keeps your heart chakra closed. Because you are now in this mindset of evaluating when should love flow and when should love not flow. And you think, or rather the separate selves you have created to deal with the shock and trauma, they think they can define when unconditional love should be allowed to flow and when it should not be allowed to flow. And how do they define this? By the conditions they define. So you see, you use conditions to define when unconditional love should flow or not flow. Again, a clear contradiction once you see it. But this is what human beings are into. Just look at human relationships. Once you enter human love, you feel that you can only express love towards another being, another human being, when that person lives up to certain conditions. And so you have people who fall in love, as they say, and now they feel that here's a person that lives up to their conditions, so they are allowing love to flow. Now, in some cases, this is actually genuine love. They still have some opening in their heart chakra, and they allow a valve to open at least partially, so some divine love can flow through. And this is what makes them feel this flow of love, this joy of being in love. But there are many other people who don't have an opening in the heart chakra, and therefore when they feel they are in love, yes, they are expressing love, but it is human love. It is actually conditional love. And it still may feel better than their normal state of mind, but not as good as when you feel divine love flowing through you. So then time passes, the honeymoon is over, as they say, and now what happens? Well, people now start feeling that the object of their love is no longer living up to the conditions. And therefore, they start withholding love, often because they are afraid of getting hurt. Now, what can get hurt? Can unconditional love get hurt? Nay. So only human love can get hurt, or only the selves that can only see human love can get hurt. And so now people go into, or those who are only open to human love are already into this attempt to use love to control the object of love, to control the person they claim to love. And so you see the innumerable examples from people's relationships of those who have gone into attempting to control, using love as a means of control. Yet, how can unconditional love be controlled? How can it be used to control others? It cannot. Only conditional love can be used to control. And how do you seek to control? By creating conditions and then projecting on the other person that he or she should live up to those conditions. Many people are in a mindset that is almost like a bargaining mindset, where they think that meeting and being in love is engaging in commerce, in a bargain, in a barter. You do this to me, I do that to you. You fulfill my conditions, I fulfill your conditions. This is a love relationship. And it is a human love relationship, but it's all based on control. So let us now look away from the average person out there and look at spiritual people who have started opening your heart chakra. Or perhaps you haven't really consciously realized this. So how do you break this cycle of the human love being trapped in these control games, seeking to control other people, even seeking to control the world? Well, as I said, it's the conditional love that closes the heart, and it's the unconditional love that opens it. But if you haven't opened the valves, how can you experience unconditional love? You can't, and that's what creates a catch-22. So how do you break it? By contemplating what human love is, what conditional love is, by realizing and accepting that divine love is beyond conditions, and then looking at yourself. What do I love? Is there something that I love more than these control games based on conditional love? Is there something I love more than this pettiness of the outer self and these meaningless, fruitless, never-ending power and control games that people are playing? And those who are spiritual people, you have either in this life or in previous lifetimes found something you love more. You go back to my previous embodiment as Paolo Veronese, the painter in Italy. I loved art more than all of this human nonsense. You see so many people throughout the ages who have risen themselves above this human power struggle because they loved something. It can be not exactly anything, but it can be many things. It can be a cause. It can be a religion. It can be art, invention. It can be another person that you actually love more than the control games of your lower self. It can be children. It can be nature. It can be beauty. It can be spiritual teachings, spiritual beings, even God. But there is something you love more than the human. What does it mean to love more? It means it is beyond conditions. It doesn't mean it is fully unconditional, but it is beyond the conditions currently defined by your separate selves that have caused you to close at least one of the valves in your heart chakra. So you must find and cultivate something that you love more. And this can, of course, be accelerated by you using the teachings we have given about the separate selves, coming to identify a certain separate self, seeing the games it's out playing, and then contemplating, what do I love more than this? Because if there's something you love more than the pettiness of the separate selves, then you are willing to give up the separate self and let it die in order to reach for the more. And it doesn't mean that you can right away open a valve in the heart and experience the flow of unconditional love. But it means that you can certainly overcome some conditions and then gradually come to a point where you open one, then another, then several of the valves in the heart chakra, eventually opening all of them. It is a simple formula that may seem so simple, too simple, especially to those who have very active minds. But it is a formula that can be used to overcome all of the conditional selves that are causing the valves in the heart chakra to close. Because when there's something you love more than a self, you can give it up. And as you give up enough cells, suddenly there will be a vibration. A valve will start pulsating back and forth, and suddenly it is flung open. There is a flow of unconditional love. Maybe sometimes you get so surprised and shocked by this unconditional love that you close the valve again and you say, what happened? What happened? What did I do? And then as you process the experience and become more used to it, you can again open the valve a little bit and then maybe close it again. And gradually you can keep it open for longer and longer and experience that flow of unconditional love. Now, it may seem strange to you if you love God or your I Am Presence or an Ascended Master more, and then that helps you open the heart chakra because you are thinking that, oh, the I Am Presence is up there on the other side of the valves in the heart. So what good does it do that unconditional love flows through my heart chakra and then back up to the I Am Presence? But that's not actually what happens. You see, again, the I Am Presence is the source of the flow of love. It doesn't need to have love directed from you to it, but by loving the presence or God or an Ascended Master, you are opening the heart chakra so you can feel the flow of love. And it is that experience of the flow of love that gives you the fulfillment. The love doesn't flow back up, it still flows out in the world. It is just that by focusing on what you loved more in the spiritual realm, it opened the heart chakra. And so, what do you love more? All of you have something you love more. You might say, why am I at a certain level of the spiritual path right now? Let's say you are at the 87th level of consciousness. How did you get there? By loving something more on each of the steps up to the 87th level. But at this level, there is still some separate self you have. that you haven't yet found something you love more than that self. And that's why you are at your current level, whatever the level is. So what you need to cultivate is this habit of monitoring yourself, looking at yourself. Is there a reaction? Is there some resistance? Is there something you feel is holding you back? And then you just realize that you haven't found something you love more. But why haven't you found something you love more? Because you love that self. Now, this may seem shocking to you that you could love a separate self, but you don't actually love it with divine love. You love it with human love, just as you can love another person with human love. And why do you love with human love? Because it does something for you, so you think. Why is it that human beings love each other with human love? Because, as I said, they have struck a bargain. You are doing something for me, that's why I love you. And so even a separate self, there is a certain human love for the self because the self protects me against a certain experience. It prevents me from feeling a certain feeling. And so you have to come to that point where you become aware of this, and then you contemplate, is there something I love more than this self and the idea that I am protected from something by the self? And this can be a little challenging in the beginning until you make it a habit, because you will feel, of course, that if you give up the self, you will be vulnerable and you will be flooded with this bad feeling that you had in the past. So let's take the messenger's example of feeling embarrassed. So he has a separate self that prevents him from feeling embarrassed in certain situations, and he thinks that if he gives it up, well, he will be flooded with this sense of being embarrassed. But you see, when was that self created? It wasn't created in childhood. Even you may have felt embarrassed or had other experiences in childhood. It was created in past lives a long time ago. That means that you have now risen far beyond the level of consciousness where the self was created. That means you will not have the same reaction to these situations today as you had back then. Why don't you see this? Because you have the self, and you think that the only way to respond to such situations is through the self. And that's why when you realize you love something more than this, therefore you want to come up higher, you want to be free of the self, then you can step outside the self and realize, even if I don't have the self, I will not react to these situations the same way I did back then, because I'm a different person now, I have a different reaction. And therefore you can dare to let the self die. And this is a simple key again. But you see, love is very simple. It either flows or it doesn't flow. But unconditional love always flows. Nothing can stop it. That's why love is simple. Divine love considers no conditions. How can it be complicated? What complicates? What complicates things? Conditions you define. Now, I am not saying that this is wrong to define conditions. You are in an unascended sphere. You are a co-creator. As we have said before, how do you co-create? By forming a concept in the mind and projecting it upon the matter light. And as long as you are unascended, how do you form a concept? By defining conditions. And this is, of course, where things get complicated, because you have two kinds of conditions. Dualistic conditions and those who are not dualistic. The conscious you starts at the 144th level of consciousness, takes on an illusion, goes to the 143rd, takes on another illusion, keeps going to the 48th level. Takes on an illusion is actually defining a condition. What is the condition? The pure awareness of the conscious you defines that in this world on earth, I am defined by this condition. Then it defines another condition. It is like facets of a diamond. Like you have a rough diamond, and first you grind off one facet, then another, until you're down at the 48th level. And you have now created this multifaceted being by defining these conditions. Again, nothing wrong here. This is what you have to do to descend into embodiment in an unascended sphere, even on a natural planet. And so, what do these conditions do? They just give you certain experiences that your I am presence then uses to grow. Now, when you step into duality, of course, you start defining more conditions, but they are now based on the dualistic mindset that always has the two opposite but relative polarities. And that is when you go into human love. So you see, unconditional love is unconditional love. But when you descend to the 48th level of consciousness, the love from your I am presence flows through all of these conditions, also these facets of the diamond that you have created, and then it is expressed in a reduced form at the 48th level. Now, you will still feel this as being very fulfilling at the 48th level. But of course, as you rise up, you will feel it in a more concentrated form, and it will feel better and better and better. But when you go into duality, you cannot feel the flow of unconditional love, even in a reduced form. It is cut off. The heart chakra is closed. And therefore, you now start defining what love is based on the dualistic mind. And you define a whole other set of conditions for what kind of a being you are in this dualistic world you now think you are in. And this, of course, is much more complicated to unravel. But it can be unraveled. And it can actually be unraveled by using love, by using this formula. Now, you may say, could a being who is below the 48th consciousness fathom this teaching and make use of it? Well, they couldn't actually fathom it, but they could make use of it. They could read it and decide very simply, I feel limited by my present state of consciousness. I have had enough of being limited by this. Is there something I love more? It would be more difficult, but it could be done. And a person could then use this simple formula to rise to the 48th level, where it experiences a connection to its I am presence, and then continue rising from there by at each step considering, what do I love more? But what happens to many who are below the 48th level is that they get trapped in the serpentine mindset of always reasoning using logic. They get trapped into thinking that it couldn't be that simple. They might read or hear this dictation and they would say, this master doesn't know what he's talking about. Cannot be that simple. You can't just say, I love something more, and then you are free of it. It can't be that simple. There must be something I have to figure out in order to be free. And we have, of course, given these teachings that you need to look at the self you have that corresponds to your present level of consciousness, come to see the illusion. But you see, coming to see the illusion is not the same as figuring something out with a linear, analytical, intellectual mind. Because how do you come to see an illusion? By experiencing that there's a reality beyond the illusion. And what is that reality? Well, it's one of the 7 rays. It can be love, but it can equally be one of the other rays. So given my position, let's focus on love. If you can experience some love for something more, it gives you a frame of reference to evaluate the illusion you have. And by simply comparing the vibration of love to the vibration of fear behind the illusion, you can come to realize that it is an illusion. You see, so many people have been trapped, especially in the modern age, but even in older ages, in thinking that you have taken on an illusion and there is a process of logic and reasoning that leads you to take on that conclusion. And you need to unravel that process, see the illusion, see through it, and then somehow magically the illusion disappears. And it is actually correct that many illusions are created through this process of the serpentine dualistic logic. And you can actually reverse the process and therefore come to see the illusion. But this is just one way. And the other way is to connect to a divine quality and simply read the vibration of the illusion versus the vibration of that which is higher. And again, you will say, well, below the 48th level, you can't experience and connect to divine love. You just said so. But yes, but even human love can be a contrast to human fear. And many people who are below the 48th level have experienced loving their children more than some limitation in their minds. And they have said, for example, not necessarily consciously, but they have said, I cannot allow my own psychology to prevent me from taking care of my children. Many have not been able to do this, but many have. Some have had a love for a pet. Some have had a love for a cause. Some have had a love for doing something well, whatever that may be. And so, by experiencing the contrast between the level of love for something greater than the self and the vibration of the fear-based self, you can actually come to see the illusion and free yourself from it by letting go of that which is less in order to rise to that which is more. Now, there are enigmas about love. For I have talked about unconditional love. But what is love really? Love is that which is always more. Love never stands still. Love cannot be captured into any matrix, any form. You cannot create any kind of form and say, this is love. Look at this. This is the ultimate love. You cannot. Love will not accept boundaries and conditions. It will flow around them. It will flow through them. It is always more. But the linear mind will say, what do you mean it's always more? How do we know it's more? There must be a linear scale then. Here's one level of love, and in order to be more, it goes to another level. But if it has a level, it must have conditions. How can it then be unconditional? How can that which is unconditional become more? Ah, my beloved, there is the challenge. I am not going to solve this for you. I am just going to leave you with this enigma. Because when you come to a certain level of the path, contemplating this simple enigma can actually help you separate yourself from the linear mind. And many of you have been deeply affected by that linear mind. Many of you realize it. Some of you have not yet seen it. How you're always having this program, this evaluation in the back of your mind. Whatever situation you go into, there is this process of thinking, evaluating. Look at yourselves right now. You are sitting here experiencing a dictation from an ascended master. What is going on in the back of your mind? Are you thinking? Are you analyzing? Are you judging? What is he saying? What does it mean? Does it make sense? Does it fit into my worldview? Can you identify that process of thinking, evaluating, analyzing? There is some part of your mind that thinks, I have got this figured out. I've got everything figured out. This master is not going to surprise me. Because whatever he says, I can fit it into my worldview. Well, fit that challenge of how the unconditional can be more into your worldview, my beloved. And see how far that gets you. But be willing to be honest and look at this evaluation. This messenger realizes fully that he had this for all of his life until the last couple of years. And it took him that long after finding the spiritual path to transcend it. Some of you have started to transcend it, but many of you haven't really started to see it. Because what is it that happens when you are evaluating? It's a focus on self, the separate self. That separate self wants to survive. How does it survive? By keeping you focused on yourself, thinking you have to figure out how the world works. So you're always thinking, yes, these ascended masters, they're kind of interesting. They have some advanced teachings. And if I can grasp them with my mind and fit them into my worldview, it makes me special. I am smart. I can figure this out. But how are you going to be free of this? What the serpentine logic projects into the collective consciousness is that when you figure out the ultimate mystery, you will be free. Look at spiritual teachings, organizations. Look at ascended master organizations. Look at yourselves. Have you not been affected by this idea that there is some ultimate teaching, some ultimate insight, and when you get it, you will have figured it out, and then you will be free. Then you will be enlightened. Then you will be ready to ascend. Then you will be smarter than anybody else. We all had it when we were in embodiment. I'm not making myself an exception to this. But some of you haven't realized it yet. You haven't looked at yourself and identified this program, constantly evaluating. It's almost as if your life is a sporting game. And there's this TV commentator that's constantly sitting there. Oh, that was a good pass. No, that wasn't far enough. Why didn't he see the guy over there who was free? And this program is constantly evaluating. Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? Why didn't you think this? What might happen? Constantly going on. It's like a talking machine in the back of your head. And does it make any sense what it's saying? Is it talking to help you be free? Is it talking to actually resolve this enigma that it projects? No, it is only talking to keep itself alive, because it thinks that if it stops talking, you are going to realize that it's not real and it's going to die. So it continues to talk and talk and talk to keep you engaged, thinking there's something you have to figure out and evaluate. For some of you, the only thing that keeps you from ascending, or at least qualifying for your ascension, is this very program, this very focus on self, that's trying to figure something out. Some of you have a self that thinks it should be able to figure out anything. This messenger realized not long ago that he actually thought that he could outsmart the fallen beings. He could come up with some argument that would make them see how illogical it is what they're saying, how contradictory it is what they're saying, how stupid it was what they are saying, as he admitted in Estonia that he had a problem with stupidity. Well, there's still this self in the back of his mind that's evaluating whether something is stupid or not. And something is too stupid, more stupid than the law allows. Again, the constant evaluation. And so all of you have something like this. It's not necessarily stupidity, it's something else. But the messenger realized that he actually thought that he could expose how ridiculous it is what the fallen beings are saying and doing. And then he realized, oh, but wait a minute now. There are actually quite a number of beings who have ascended from Earth. And wait a minute now, last I checked, I hadn't ascended. So why haven't I and why have they? Why did Paul the Venetian ascend, Master Moore ascend, Saint Germain ascend, Mother Mary ascend, Jesus ascend? What did they figure out that I haven't figured out? Well, he realized if it had been possible to prove the fallen beings wrong, wasn't it conceivable that Jesus or Gautama or Saint Germain would have done this? So if I think I can do what these people, these beings who have ascended couldn't do, am I not thinking I'm smarter than them? And when he saw this, he let the self die, because he realized how it could only be a separate self that thought it was smarter than ascended masters. And perhaps it was the separate self that thought it was smarter and should be smarter than both ascended masters and fallen beings. That meant he couldn't let go, because he still was looking for that ultimate argument. And some of you are looking for some ultimate understanding. but these are conditions you have defined for yourself. Yes, the fallen beings and the serpentine logic might very well have affected you, but in the end, this talking head inside your mind that is like a parrot that's constantly repeating the same thing, you have defined it. And the wonderful thing about admitting that is you can undefine it. You just need to see it and see it for what it is. Why do I need to evaluate everything? Why do I need to constantly look at myself, criticize myself, condemning myself, judging myself for not living up to some standard? Am I going to ascend by finally living up to the standard, finally finding this ultimate argument? Or am I going to ascend when I see the futility of trying to do this and say, what do I love more than this gain? And then just letting it go, walking away from it. Sure, it's unfinished. Sure, the fallen beings are going to say, ha, we were smarter than him or her too. But who's the smartest one? The fallen beings or the ascended masters who have ascended? So let the fallen beings think whatever they think. What is that to thee? Follow thou me. And so you see, what did I say? Love is simple. It always wants more. But in order to have more, you have to let go of what is less. How hard is that to figure out? What is there to figure out? You don't need to figure out anything in the mind, because love is entirely experiential. You either experience unconditional love, or you define conditions in the mind that you think are love. There's nothing to figure out about love. You don't need to figure out anything about love. You just need to open yourself to its flow. And what keeps you from experiencing the flow is all the sophisticated conditions created in the mind. Now, you can also say from another perspective that what keeps your heart chakra closed is the focus on self, the outer self. What does it mean then to love something more than that self? It means it's not about the self anymore. You can say, it's not about you, it's not about me. But you need to make the discernment that it's not about you as the separate self. It is about you as the real self, the conscious you. What does it mean that the conscious you is pure awareness or neutral awareness? It doesn't accept any conditions as defining it. Again, a seeming contradiction or enigma to the linear mind. Because didn't I just say that the conscious you descends to the 144th level, defines a condition, goes on and on all the way to the 48th? Yes. But as long as you have some connection to your I am presence, you are not fully identified with the conditions. You see, there is a fundamental difference between even being at the 48th level, where you have a lot of conditions, but realizing that these are just a vehicle for interacting with the unascended sphere. and then being below the 48th level, where you have lost your connection to your own presence, and therefore you are fully identified with your conditions. Why are you at a certain level of consciousness, say the 87th? Because there's a condition at the 87th level that you actually think defines you. The conscious you thinks, this condition defines me. How will you rise to the 88th level? By coming to see, oh, that condition at the 87th doesn't actually define me. There's more to me. And then you rise to the 88th. And then in the beginning, you are feeling, now I know myself. This is who I am. And after some time, you're beginning to realize, perhaps that's still some limitation. Do I love something more than being at the 88th level? Well, then you rise to the 89th and so forth and so on. I was the painter. What do you see in the world of painters? You have painters and you have critics. And what are the critics? They are people who can't paint, but who think they know better than the painters how the painter should paint and what the painter meant when he was painting this. But does a painter necessarily have some sophisticated meaning behind painting? Maybe he just paints because he loves beauty. He loves the play of the light of the different colors, the different shades of paint. Maybe he loves that he can actually paint with a certain transparency where it seems like there's something behind the painting shining through. There's no sophisticated reasoning there. You may have heard that many years ago, some people decided to take some canvases, some brushes, and some paint, and put it in a room with a bunch of chimpanzees. And the chimpanzees started painting on the canvases, making these abstract paintings. And then they decided to submit these paintings to an art exhibition. And here were the critics coming up with all kinds of sophisticated arguments for what this painter meant when he put that gob of red paint on that particular spot. He had some sophisticated, deeper intent. Well, how did they feel when they realized it was a chimpanzee who painted that painting? But you see, this is your inner critic, trying to complicate everything to keep itself alive. Trying to say there must be some sophisticated reasoning, something to figure out. But a lot of your thought process is just a monkey mind, painting on the canvas of your mental body. There's nothing to figure out there. Just let it go. And now when I say this, what's your reaction? What's the reaction from your inner critic? Oh, but you can't just let it go. No, this is not true what he's saying. It can't be that simple. You can't just let it go. There's something you have to figure out. There's nothing you have to figure out in order to get out of the separate mind. You just have to leave it behind, that separate mind. There's nothing you have to find to get out of the separate mind, except perhaps unconditional love. So you might contemplate what happens when you are in love. So you love this person. You feel this flow of love. Why does that feel good? Because when you are in love, you're not in the mind. You're not trying to figure out anything about how sophisticated the other person is, why you love that person, why that person deserves to be loved. You're just feeling the flow. And then when you fall out of love, what has happened? Well, now the mind has gotten its tentacles into this relationship. And now there's something you have to figure out. And all of a sudden, a relationship that started out being the flow of love can become something entirely different. As this movie with a title, It's Complicated. And suddenly a relationship becomes complicated instead of being the flow of love. But what is it that complicates it? It's that inner critic you have. And why is it complicating it? Is there some real purpose for it? Does it lead somewhere? Is there something you are going to figure out? It complicates it in order to stay alive. Now, some will say, but look at all these teachings you have given us, that we go into separation, have experiences, but when we go out of separation, by rising and seeing the illusions, we grow from that also. So isn't it good that it's complicated? Isn't it a lesson we need to learn? Isn't there some lesson we need to learn? Well, yes. But what is the overall lesson you need to learn on earth? It is that there is nothing on earth that you cannot let go of. You just have to see it. See that it's not real. Yes, we are not advocating instant awakening, where you, from any level, can instantly catapult up to the 144th level. But you see what I'm saying? Behind the illusions of every level is just this realization that there's nothing to figure out. It's just a matter of letting it go. And you can let it go by just experiencing the contrast between the vibration of the illusion and the vibration of love. There is nothing to figure out. I am tempted to shout, there is nothing to figure out. And so I have enjoyed this interaction with you. I hope you have found some enjoyment as well. I have enjoyed interacting with all of you and with you as a group, both you who are here, those who are connected. I have actually interacted with you at an energetic level beyond the outer words that are spoken. Some of you will be aware of this, some of you not. It doesn't matter. I have sort of been the artist with my paintbrush and my palette, painting in your auras, wherever there was something that I could illuminate, make more obvious to you. And if you will, give me a little attention once in a while. Ask me to show you what it is you haven't seen. I will assist you to the best of my ability. So you don't need a sophisticated ritual. You don't need to give my decree necessarily, even though you can if you feel like it. You don't need to take my book from the Self-Mastery series, although you can if you feel like it. But you can also make it very simple. You can just contemplate the enigma of unconditional love becoming more. And when you feel that this has baffled your outer mind, you can just send me a thought. Paul the Venetian, help me see something. Help me see what I haven't seen. And I will, to the best of my ability, help you see it. But what is it that a painter does? So many people are focused on the act of putting paint on the canvas. But a great painter starts by seeing that which most people don't see. And what is the most important ability of a spiritual student? Seeing that which most people don't see. Seeing that in your own mind, which most people don't see in their own minds. So, again, it has been my enjoyment to interact with you. And I seal you in that joy of the third ray. I have radiated unconditional love. But during the process of this dictation, I have also become more unconditional.